Good morning and welcome to Mother's Day at Morning Star Fellowship. We're so excited to share with you today a special day. First of all, I want to say Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. And I also want to just welcome all the women because we're going to be sharing something today about women in the Bible, women who have impacted our world in amazing ways. And that's just like all of you. You all have the opportunity to be impactful in today's world. We live in a culture where women are trying to be canceled out, but God, that is not his plan. There's gender confusion, but not to God. God created male and female, each one with its own purpose. We are like the peanut butter and jelly together. God made us to work together, and we're not trying to compete with men. We are complementing and serving in our roles. Did you know the Bible is full of women that have done amazing things? So you'll join me this morning with some women from our congregation that are going to share stories about women who've done some amazing things. So welcome these women to your campus. Thank you so much. We are excited to share. So we're going to begin with Tiffany Dufresne.
So my story comes from the book of Exodus. It's about Shiphrah and Puah. They were midwives in the Old Testament. It was during the time when the Hebrews were gaining in numbers in the land, and the Pharaoh did not like that. So he ordered, instead of having them get more and more people, and then he was afraid that they were going to overthrow them, that he ordered these midwives to go and kill newborn baby boys. And their job mainly was to bring in life, like these babies, to take care of these babies as their moms became stronger. So I'm thinking to myself, who was he asking? Did he really make sense of this, who he was asking at this time? Because as a mom and even as a nurse, I'm called to love people and take care of people and make them better than when I found them. So these midwives, thinking of what they had to do, and at that time to go against the Pharaoh's orders, it was such a lot of courage and a lot of risk, of their lives to disobey the Pharaoh's command. I'm thinking as a rule follower myself, I don't want that red check or red X behind my name. So what were they going to do? But knowing that this was wrong, that they stepped up and did something about it. They ended up not killing those baby boys and telling them that, oh, well, I'm sorry, the babies came too fast, and the Jewish people, their babies just come too fast, and I just wasn't there in time. So I look at these women and I just think they're mentioned by name for a reason. They might have had a small part there, but God used them in their small part of obedience that would lead them to a bigger story that would change history, because they inspired other people to obey. That led to Moses' mom not throwing her baby in the Nile, which was the next order that he had put out there. So she ended up making a basket and sending him down the Nile, where we know that the Pharaoh's daughter was able to find him. So I just think that is incredible that small step of obedience led to such a change in history and change in the world. And I think of myself, just being asked to sit here today. I'm always telling God, no, I don't think so. I think, I'm shy, I'm quiet, I'm not well-spoken, I'm just a mom, I'm just, a wife, I'm just, this or that. And I just think I give him all the flaws to make him change his mind. And he says, no, I want you. And that's what I want. So it's just really important to me that their story just spoke to me in that way. And I just feel like with stepping out in my obedience, I'm able to prove his confidence in me, and that he's able to make me bolder, refine my character, and chisel away my selfishness. So I'm glad he uses it to change me and define my blessings to change my eternity rather than temporarily make me comfortable.
Hi, yes, I'm talking about Esther, and a lot of people know Esther. She's a more common name. She's in the Old Testament, and the beginning of the book starts out with King Xerxes having this festival, and he is asking his current wife, Queen Vashti to come, and she refuses. The queen is not going to come, and he, of course, is very upset. And his surrounding men are like, you need to do something about this because she's in a high power. She's going to be setting an example. We can't have wives, despising their husbands. So he sends out a decree saying that she is going to be dethroned. She is no longer the queen, and he's finding a new one. So that's where Esther comes in, and she was one of the virgins chosen to come and received beauty treatments for 12 months, and they were all presented to the king, and she was chosen. She had favor in his eyes to be the new queen. And Esther was Jewish and raised by her uncle Mordecai. She did not tell the king at that time that she was Jewish and where her family and where her people came from. And a few years later, Haman, who was one of the king's men, set out a decree saying that all the Jewish people in the land were going to be killed. And obviously when Mordecai, Esther's uncle, found out, he was devastated, and they spoke to each other through correspondence, and he was like, you need to do something about this. What if you came to this kingdom for such a time as this? And I think that's the thing that people hear about Esther that really sticks out, for such a time as this. And Esther fasted and prayed with her people and her maids for 3 days. And I won't go into all the details to keep it short, but I guess the conflict for Esther was she wanted to save her people, obviously. She didn't want a whole generation of people killed. But if she went to the king and wasn't called and went to the inner courts, then she could be killed. And we know what happened to the first wife that he had, that she just didn't want to come to a festival, and he was like, you're gone. So I'm sure she knew that, and in her head was thinking, what am I going to do? And that's when she fasted and prayed, and she did go to the king, and her life was spared, obviously, and so were all of her people. The Jews were saved. So when I think about Esther, 2 things really stuck out to me that can apply to us today. The first being she knew the power of prayer and fasting. And I don't know about you guys, but when I have a problem, I will call my mom, I will call my husband, I will call my friends, and I'm like, what should I do? And I want advice from other people, which I don't think there's anything wrong with getting, wise counsel, but I don't go to God first. And she went to God first and knew, I need your help. I'm in a tough situation, and I need Holy Spirit discernment and a word from you. And the other thing too is she didn't make a rash decision. She waited those 3 days, and she really took that gentle and quiet spirit that we read about in 1 Peter. And I think when Christian women hear that, you need to have a gentle and quiet spirit, a lot of us are like, oh, I don't like that, because it just feels like you can't say anything. You just need to be submissive and you don't have a voice. But that's not what it means. It just means you have your strength under control. And she did it with dignity and courage and didn't rush in there and make all these demands. But she knew what God was calling her to do and stepped that out. Which brings me to the last point, which is she's a woman of destiny, and she knew her destiny and rose to that. And she didn't let the surrounding circumstances or fear of her life stop her from doing what God called her to do. And we were talking earlier, I think the evil and the craziness in our world has just continued to accelerate. And we can often look at our surroundings and think, how can I stand up for what I believe in at work when everyone else around me is doing horrible things, and they're going to think I hate them if I say what I believe? Or as a mom of 3 kids, you look at the world and what people are doing and allowing and teaching kids in school, and you're like, how am I ever going to raise a godly kid in such an ungodly world? But we need to keep our eyes focused on the Creator, which is what Esther did, and not the surroundings, because He will show us the way. He will use us, and I think He's so intentional. All of us were created to be in this generation for a specific reason. If you look at nature, if you look at how our bodies work, being a nurse, I'm sure you see that. It's amazing how God, the intention He put into us. We are not here by mistake. He put us in this generation knowing what the world would be, knowing that it would be crazy, but that we have a destiny, all of us. And we might not be queens, we might not be kings, but we can play a small part, just like the first example we heard, that could change a generation. And I just want people to know that you were made for this moment, and God can use even you to bring His glory and redemptive power from heaven to earth.
I'm going to talk about Deborah. So Deborah is usually only heard of as a judge in Israel. What they don't know is that there were 12 judges of Israel, and she actually was in the top 5 listed. Like, she was powerful, a powerful woman in 1200 BC. Culture, culture very much the same as ours today. It was wicked. It was a very wicked time, so wicked that the men, because they had 80 years of peace before her, had gotten, even the warriors had gotten apathetic, lazy, gluttonous. They were weak, and they just would not go out and fight the battle anymore. They were done because they were lulled to sleep. And it was an eye-opening as I was reading this. When I read that, it was like, wait a second. They were lulled to sleep. And that's been kind of the call. Mike said something last week about look up and awake. And Deborah, the Lord chose Deborah, who was a wife of Lepideth and a seer. It said the Lord gave her visions, and a prophet. Not only did he give her visions, but he gave her the boldness to speak those visions. It said powerful men and nobles in Judges chapter 4 and 5. Her story is, I'm not going to go through it all because it's a longer story. But I encourage everybody to read it because there are little details in there that I had no clue about. But one of the things that I saw that was so equal to our culture was that they had forgotten who God was, his character, how mighty he was, and then they forgot who they were. They were a chosen people of God. And if you're a chosen people of God Almighty, there's nothing that they couldn't do. And they should be like awake and vibrant and taking the land, because it's only the second generation after Joshua had come in. And actually the judge before, Othniel, I'm not sure how to say it, was Caleb's cousin. So it's like they saw what God did to bring them into the promised land. And so did Deborah. And Deborah remembered. And she walked in that, and she honored Lepideth, her husband. And she'd never, ever put down the warriors or the men or anything like that, but she just acted in obedience to what God was calling her to. And when she called up Barak, the general of their army, because there were war at the gates, there were enemy armies all around them. And she called him up and said, this is what is happening. And the Lord has said for you to go down and face Jabin, the king of the Canaanites, and Sisera, the general. And Barak said, okay, on one condition, if you go with me. And Deborah was like, all right, I am going to go with you, but the Lord has said, if I go with you on this condition, you will not receive the glory. He will rout them out for you, and you will fight, and you'll be victorious, but by the hand of a woman will this be done and finished. And she spoke that to him, and he's like, okay, I'm good with that. Let's go do that. So she called up the warriors, and they're out of 40,000 men and warring men in Israel, only 1,000 came. And several tribes were not like near the area, but Naphtali and Zebulun were key ones, and she gives them praise. The Lord praises them. And in the end of the battle, the Lord rains down pouring rain, and their warriors were in chariots. They couldn't move. They got trapped. So God was fighting for them, just as he said he was promised. God is fighting for us. There are so many battles where we're like, there's no way. We're going to obey, but there's no way we're going to win this. And God intercedes and does the amazing thing. And to read that way, it says, and the stars rained down. It said, in literal Hebrew, it was pouring like the skies were falling down and totally trapped them out. So Barak did get Jabin the king, and then Sisera gets out of his chariot and runs for his life, thinking he sees a woman in a tent. He could go in there safely. Well, the woman was Jaal, the wife of Hadar, the Canaanite, who was in Naphtali. And she's a very wise woman, obviously very beautiful. And she lets him come in. I will take care of you. Opens up the tent door. He comes in and he says, I'm so thirsty. Thank you for hiding me. Can you give me a drink of water? She did one better. She got a big glass of milk. What does milk do to a person after they've been very thirsty and in battle? It makes them very tired. The element, God is so good at using those details. She gives him milk. He lays down, falls asleep, covered with a rug. And the Lord gives her such courage. And through, watching, I'm sure, Deborah be obedient to what the Lord was showing her, she takes a tent peg in one hand and with her right hand a hammer and drives a tent peg through this mighty general. It was not a little guy, a mighty general's head. And he convulses and he dies. And then up comes Barak and she goes, I know who you're looking for. He's in here. And when he comes in and opens that and sees him dead at her feet, he realizes the Lord did exactly what Deborah had told him would do. Yes, you will have victory, but the glory will go to the hand of the woman. Deborah, as all women tend to, we make a song out of things. So the song of Deborah at the end gives glory to the Lord, calls all the nobles that didn't show up even, all the volunteers that did show up, and says, sing praise to the Lord because he has done this thing. He routed the enemy. He overcame the enemy. And there's a whole section in chapter 5, verses 20 and 23 that talks about the Lord's response and protection and obedience. And at the very end, it says in verses, 24, most blessed of women is Jaal, the wife of Heber the Kenite, most blessed of tent-dwelling women. He asked for water, she gave him milk. In a magnificent bowl, she brought cream. Her hand on a tent peg, her right hand on a workman's hammer. She did what she was called to do, and she was honored, and the Lord said she would be honored. And that shows us God does exactly what he says he's going to do. So for us, we've all been through things that is like, how is this going to turn out? Okay, God, I will follow your lead, but I'm really scared to death, or I just have no clue, and I'm done. And we lose hope. But we need to remember Deborah in this time and go, God can do it. He's our hope. Fix our eyes on him and encourage one another. And I think it's as we encourage one another with these stories and with our own stories that other women rise up and go, I can be that wife. I can be that mother. I can be that friend in this hopeless, seemingly, situation because I'm a child of the Most High God. And he has said in his word, and if he has said it, he will do it.
So today I'm sharing about Rahab. And Rahab was a Canaanite and a prostitute in the walled city of Jericho. The beginning of her story starts in Joshua 2, when Joshua and the Israelite army were in a position to take the land of Canaan. Joshua sent spies into Jericho, and the spies landed in Rahab's home. And after some time, the king realized that these spies were there and came to Rahab and asked her to, bring them out. And she said they had fled. And meanwhile, she hid them upstairs on her roof. And at that point, Rahab did realize that these men were men of God. And so she boldly approached them and said, we know the Lord has given you this land, and Jericho is utterly helpless and hopeless. The Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. So she acknowledged the hopelessness and helplessness of the city and of herself. And this is where she basically surrendered herself to God's mercy and asked the spies to spare her, and not only her, but her family. When the Israelites came and attacked the city, they marched for the 6 days, and then the seventh day came in and attacked. And they had given Rahab a scarlet thread to hang from her window and told her, if you bring your family into your home at the time that the city collapses, which it did, we will rescue you. And so that happened. So here, looking at Rahab's life, they rescued her family, and brought them outside the camp, but Jesus, in his infinite wisdom and mercy, brought her inside the line of Jesus. So what we can learn from her, and really for me as I was reading about her and her past, that God saves those with a past. And, we all have pasts. And I have a past. You know, I can sit here and say that by the mercy of God, I'm here. I did not make great choices in my teenage years, and, you know, came into my Christianity with a lot of shame and embarrassment because the initial crowd that I was introduced to as believers did not have the past that I did. So I felt, you know, not as qualified to be in ministry, not worthy, not good enough. But the Lord, Jesus, you know, his blood covers it all. So not only does God save those with a past, he uses those with a past. And as he used Rahab to not only save her family, but then also raise a son, Boaz, who rescued a widow and was also in the line of Jesus. So, so in that process, he also redefines us. And so you look at Rahab's beginning story. She was described as Rahab the harlot in the Old Testament. And in the New Testament, in Matthew 1, she is now mother of Boaz. So he totally redefined who she was. So for me, it was just encouraging to, again, be reminded of, you know, who I was, who the Lord, how the Lord rescued me, and how he can use me and is using me to bring his message of deliverance, of rescue, of healing to others, my family, you know, and hopefully a lineage like she did.
I always think rescued people rescue people.
Yes.
They do. Amen.
Yes.
Thank you, Kim, for sharing that. And now we're going to hear from Rachel. Rachel's going to share on
the story of Hannah in 1 Samuel 1 and chapter 2. Hannah lived in the time of judges over Israel before the time of kings, when people did what was right in their own eyes. Israel was pressed on all sides by enemies that mocked their obedience to God, and many of the Israelites strayed and were worshiping idols and drunkenness and sexual immorality. And Hannah was in the middle of that. And she was married to a man named Elkanah, and he was loving and he was an honorable husband who loved Hannah deeply. Elkanah had another wife, Peninnah, who mocked Hannah because God did not fulfill that desire that she had in her heart to be a mother. And many times in that culture, the worth of a woman was measured by how many sons she could bear. So she was in the middle of all of this, and for years, God didn't fulfill that desire as he fulfilled it in Peninnah, and as she had to watch that, where she would have many children and Hannah had none, and that caused her a lot of grief. And one year, her whole family, they went to worship and honor God by giving offerings in Shiloh. And Hannah couldn't eat. She was so grieved. She was distressed. She was in pain. And all she could do was go out and pray. Pray fervently to God to give her a child. And she says, the word says she was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. And because she prayed with so much passion, the priest Eli thought that she had come drunk to the tabernacle, because it was very common for people and women to come drunk to worship Baal in that area. And he told her to stop drinking, stop her drunkenness. And Hannah was like, no, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not drunk. I'm just pouring out my soul to the Lord and praying wordlessly, because her lips were moving, but she was praying in her heart. And Eli realized that wasn't what she was doing. And he said, go in peace. And he said, whatever you're petitioning him for, may it be granted to you. And in her prayer, Hannah called out to Jehovah Tsabah, the Lord of hosts, to see her affliction. And she vowed that the Lord would answer. If he would answer the desire of her heart, she would surrender her child back to him. Afterwards, Hannah was unburdened and able to eat and feast again, knowing that she gave it all to God. Sure enough, the Lord answered her prayer, and after she weaned her son, she came and she brought her firstborn son, Samuel, who we all know as the prophet Samuel of the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel to serve the Lord all the days of his life and give him glory. There were many people doing what was right in their own eyes, but Hannah did what God called her to do, to go before him and pray to him humbly with everything she had, just pouring out her soul to him. Hannah took what God gave her also and answering her prayer and gave it back to him to glorify him. And, you know, in my own season where the desire of my heart has not been fulfilled in the way that I want, and the feelings of the enemy pressing in on me on all sides and feeling kind of mocked, I am only calmed in the presence of God. I know only joy in his promises. And I have a choice to make, to surrender, to do what is right, to surrender or do what is right in my own eyes. But when I surrender, I am victorious. And so I just want to end with Hannah's prayer after she gave Samuel to God, because it's more than what I can say. It is, you know, from her heart, and it is who God is. And Hannah prayed, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. My strength rises up in the Lord. My mouth mocks my enemies because I rejoice in your deliverance. No one is holy like the Lord, no one except you. There is no rock like our God. Do not go on and on talking so proudly, spouting arrogance from your mouth, because the Lord is the God who knows and weighs every act. The bows of mighty warriors are shattered, but those who are stumbling now dress themselves in power. Those who were filled now sell themselves for bread, but the ones who were starving are now fat from food. The woman who was barren has birthed 7 children, but the mother with many sons has lost them all. The Lord, he brings death, gives life, takes down to the grave and raises up. The Lord, he makes poor, gives wealth, brings low, but also lifts up high. God raises the poor from the dust, lifts up the needy from the garbage pile. God sits them with officials, gives them the seat of honor. The pillars of the earth belong to the Lord. He sets the world on top of them. God guards the feet of his faithful ones, but the wicked die in darkness, because no one succeeds by strength alone. The Lord, his enemies are terrified. God thunders against them from heaven. The Lord judges the far corners of the earth. May God give strength to his king and raise high the strength of his anointed one. And we all if we would just go to God in prayer, if we would just humble ourselves before him, he will be what we need.
That was absolutely beautiful, Rachel. I love that you closed with that prayer, because that prayer says it all. I know it's a little different to have a service like that, but I am very thankful for all of those women who were willing to share from their hearts, all different phases of life, experiences of life, just, some were mothers, some were not. But God has a special thing for women. And God has used women all throughout history. And so today, I want to just share. It's only going to just be a few moments. It's 9:55. And so if you'll just give me about 5 minutes right now, because I want to have a time of prayer. I feel like we're in a season of the world that is just the craziest season ever, where women are trying to be canceled out of society, basically, and our worth and our value and who we are and who God has called us to be is maybe trying to be diminished. Because if we can get women to not live in their purpose, we have created a world of chaos. We need mothers, we need women, we need everyone to fulfill what God has called them to do. So I'm going to take us into the New Testament right now, to a woman that probably you've heard her name, but she's not a common story. We don't talk about her that much, and her name is Pricilla. And there's a few lessons I want to learn today from Pricilla. This is number 1. She was a regular working woman. How many of you are working women? We're going to go into the book of Acts, and it says this, Acts chapter 18, verses 1 to 3. It says, after this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he met a Jew named Aquila, that was the husband, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Pricilla, because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker, they stayed with him. The couple lived in Rome, so back then the couple were living in Rome, this couple. They were a working family. All of a sudden they had to leave Rome because there was persecution. It happens over and over again, right, in the world. The Jews were being persecuted. They had to rush out of there. They came to Corinth, and they meet Paul. Paul's a tent maker. We all know who Paul is, right? The Apostle Paul. So they meet Paul, and they begin to speak with him. And they ask him to live with them. They're hospitable. And that's my second point. Pricilla was hospitable. I want you to ask yourselves, ladies, when was the last time you were hospitable? When was the last time you invited someone into your home and made a meal for them? When was the last time you gathered with someone at your house? How many of you are so busy? How many of you feel busy? You're working, you have children. You have a lot going on, I know, because I'm pretty busy too. And I am very busy. And sometimes I feel like I put off that era that I'm so busy. And that is honestly the last thing I want to put off about myself, that I'm so busy. Because I'm not busy. I'm not so busy that I don't have time for people. We can't be that busy. And the reason I'm bringing that out is because we live in a day that is snapping our time, snapping who we are. I was reading this morning about women. You know, we have this battle right now, Roe versus Wade. And it's a miraculous thing that this is happening. It really is. It's miraculous. It's a God thing. But you know, the enemy would like to take that God thing right now and take it right down to humanity level, so that people that are on the pro-life side are screaming at people on the pro-life, the left. They're screaming at them. And I want to say to us people, us women, we don't scream at other people. We don't scream our rights. You know where we go with our rights? We go to our knees and we begin to pray that out. Pray it out. It's a God thing. So Pricilla, there's another thing about her that I really love. It says this, she was hospitable because when Paul met them in Corinth, if you go to 1 Corinthians 2:3, it says this, when I met you in fear and trembling. So whatever was going on in Paul's life, he was in this position of fear and trembling, and he met Pricilla, and they invited him in. They were hospitable. Number 3, what I love about her. And ladies, I want this to be us. She was concerned about the gospel above all things. There's another person she met. I think this is so interesting. Her and her husband were in Ephesus, and they met Apollos. You've heard of Apollos in the Bible. He was an evangelist. He was a learned man because he was Jewish. And so he had a great reputation. He was charismatic. He spoke, and people loved him. Because you go on, and if you go on in the epistles, it says, I am of Apollos, I am of Paul. So people loved Apollos. He had a lot to say. But one thing, he did not know exactly the truth. It says that he didn't know, he knew the gospel, he knew the baptism of John, but he didn't know the way of Jesus. And so they also took him in and they taught him. So they considered it serious enough, even though he was a great speaker, they had to bring him in and teach him. See, Pricilla cared about the gospel. She cared about other people knowing what the Word of God said. She cared about that. And I want to say to us as women, do we care about that? Do we care about not just being hospitable, but do we care about mentoring people? Do we care about leading people to Jesus? Is that on our mind too? And if you have children today, do you care about that? Do you care about that more than the sport team that they're playing on? More than the extracurricular events that they're doing? Do you care enough to know that your children are being discipled in Jesus? It's not just Sunday. We can do a piece of it. But it's your job, ladies. It's your job, ladies, to do that. You know, we've heard these stories today about Deborah. Deborah had to step up when maybe a man didn't step up. That's not a diss on men. Everyone has their gifts. Maybe in your world, you have the gift of teaching. And that's your role in your family. We need to do what we are called to do. She was concerned about the gospel above all else. And this last part about Pricilla I really love. She was treated as an equal. In the New Testament, when you hear her name, if you go on in those scriptures, they're in the notes. Her name is now listed first. So what does that mean? That means a lot, actually, in the New Testament. In that period of time when women and men, you know, women didn't have maybe the equality, but to Jesus, women are very equal. They have a voice. You have a voice. She was considered a business partner of her husband. She led with authority when she led. And so today, I'm going to ask you all to stand. And ladies, I'm going to make that bold move right now. I'm going to ask all of you to come forward. If you're a woman in this building, come on forward. Do not be shy. Look at these beautiful women. We're going to sing a song right now. That song is, I Want to Make Room for You. And I know sometimes it is just a, come on up, come on all the way up. Come on all the way up. You beautiful women. You men are going to have a part of this in just a moment. It's only 10:04. Yay. We have a moment. Sometimes I feel like we're so rushed. But we have a moment in the presence of the Lord. We're going to sing that song, I Want to Make Room for You. And ladies, I want that to be your heart cry right now. We want to make room for you. We're going to sing that out. And men, here's your role. I want you to lift up your hands. And I want you to pray over these women. Because they need every ounce of encouragement from you. They need every positive thought in a world that is pushing them down, basically. I want them to know that you've got them. You're behind them. You love them. You support them. John has always been there for me. Always saying, you can do it. You're beautiful. You got this. You're good. Whatever. Which I appreciate. But do that for these women too, okay? Let's sing that song. Turn off my mic for a second.